I have been measuring land for other people my entire working life. That is what a land surveyor does. You walk the ground. You read the markers. You find out exactly where one man's property ends and another man's begins. You learn to ignore what people tell you the boundary is, because what people tell you and what the ground actually says are frequently two different things. After 31 years of doing that work, in rain and heat, in the kind of Ohio February cold that makes a man reconsider his career choices around a third hour of standing in a cornfield, I can tell you this with confidence. The people who are most certain about where the line is are almost never the people who drew it. That lesson has served me well in every area of my life. My name is Dale Brennan. I am 52 years old. I live in Millhaven, Ohio, a city of about 34,000 people in the western part of the state, where the downtown has 3 good diners, a county courthouse built in 1911, and a recorder's office on Mill Street that smells like old paper and industrial carpet cleaner. I retired from surveying 14 months ago after my left knee finally decided it had processed its last hillside. I have no complaints about the work. It was honest, and it was mine, and it taught me everything I needed to know. My son, Nathan, is 29. He is a good man. He works in equipment leasing for a regional firm, does well enough at it, bought a house on Fernwood Drive about 4 miles from mine 3 years ago. He calls me twice a week, usually on Tuesday evenings and Sunday mornings, which tells me something about the shape of his week. He has his mother's eyes and my habit of going quiet when something is bothering him rather than announcing it, which is either a virtue or a fault depending on the situation. And Claire is his wife. Welcome to Quiet House Stories. Get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. I want to be honest about Claire before I say anything else. When Nathan brought her home the first time, for years ago, she was warm. Not performed warm, genuinely warm, the kind that shows up in small attentions. She remembered what I took in my coffee, without being told twice. She laughed at things that weren't particularly funny, which I've always considered a decent quality in a person, because it means they're paying attention. On Nathan's birthday that first year, she made a pot roast and cornbread from scratch. Not from a mix, from scratch, and she set the table with the good dishes. I noticed that. I still notice it when I think back through those years, because it matters to the story. She was, at the beginning, someone I was glad my son had found. The changes came gradually. They usually do. You don't notice the fog until you've been standing in it for a while, and then you realize you haven't been able to see clearly for longer than you thought. It started, I believe, with the house on Clover Street. My mother, Dale Brennan, lived on Clover Street for 43 years. She was a precise woman who kept a detailed household ledger, grew roses along the south fence every summer from 1998 onward, and held the firm opinion that most problems in the world trace back to insufficient preparation. She was right about that more often than not. When she passed in November of 2019, she left me the house outright. Clean title, no encumbrances, filed correctly because she had done the paperwork herself the year prior when she first started having the health scares. That was her way. She didn't wait for things to become urgent. She took care of them in advance and filed them in the correct drawer. I inherited the house, and 14 days after a funeral, I drove to the recorder's office on Mill Street and had the deed transferred into my name. Instrument number 2020-00847, filed January 14th of 2020. I kept the deed in a manila folder in the third drawer of my home office, behind my father's watch, a Bulova from 1961, that he wore every working day of his life, and that stopped running sometime in 1994, and in front of an old Ohio survey certification from 2004, I knew where it was at all times. That is not a small thing. I wasn't ready to sell the house. I paid the taxes, kept the utilities at a low level through the winters, went over twice a month to check that the gutters were clear and the rose bushes had what they needed. Nathan said once that this was sentimental. I said, correct. He didn't push it. By the spring of 2022, Claire had begun making suggestions about the house. Careful suggestions, built in layers. The house needed updating before it could sell well. Short-term rental income would help offset the carrying costs. and then the layer that landed differently from the others. They could take it off my hands and move in. It was closer to Claire's parents. Nathan's commute would be easier. The house would stay in the family. Everyone would benefit. I listened to all 3 layers. I said I would think about it. What I did not say was that the word take was doing a lot of work in that sentence, and that I had noticed it doing that work, and that I had filed the observation away in a way that I file most things, not with alarm, but with attention. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over a man who has spent his entire career locating the exact positions of boundaries. You get used to knowing precisely where things are. You also get used to recognizing, without requiring it to be explained to you, when someone is trying to move a marker without mentioning it. That fall, I agreed to let Nathan and Claire live in my mother's house. Not give, not transfer. Live in it, while they sorted out what they wanted to do with their own property on Fernwood Drive. We had a clear conversation about it. I thought it was clear, and I wrote up a simple letter of understanding, 1 page, in plain language, stating that nothing about ownership had changed, that this was a temporary residential arrangement, and that we would review the situation in 12 months. Nathan signed it. I signed it. I gave Nathan a copy and kept the original in the manila folder, in the 3rd drawer behind the watch. 12 months came and went. We did not review it. Nathan mentioned it once, in passing. I said we should sit down soon, and we didn't sit down soon, and the months continued. I am not a dramatic man. I don't make speeches, and I don't slam doors, and I don't require an audience for my decisions. But I do believe that when something is yours, the documentation ought to say so clearly, and a man ought to know where his documentation is and what it says. My mother taught me that. The work taught me that. The 2 reinforced each other over 31 years, until it became less a belief than a reflex. I was aware, through the fall of 2022 and into 2023, that Claire's relationship to the Clover Street house had shifted. She stopped referring to it as your mother's place. She began describing projects. The kitchen was going to be updated. The screen porch was going to get new screening. The rose bushes along the south fence were probably going to come out because they were old and scraggly, and a privacy hedge would be more practical. I did not say anything about the rose bushes. I registered it, and I said nothing. Nathan's calls gradually shortened. Not dramatically, just incrementally, the way a river changes course. You look up one day, and the water is somewhere slightly different than it was. Claire's warmth at family dinners became something more like efficiency. She organized the evenings. She organized the guest list and the seating and the conversation, with the quiet authority of someone managing a room they consider theirs. My brother Ray noticed before I said anything. Ray Brennan is 57, retired Army, lives in Columbus, drives up once a month for dinner and a game and approximately 17 words of conversation across the whole evening. He has the economy of a man who spent 22 years deciding which information was necessary and which was not, and acting accordingly. One Saturday in October 2023, after a dinner at the Clover Street house, where Claire had navigated the conversation with precision of someone who had prepared for a deposition, Ray and I sat on the front porch in the cold for a few minutes before he drove home. She's running point, he said. She's organized, I said. Same thing, he said. He finished his coffee. He drove home. I kept that conversation, too, in the same place I keep the other ones. Filed. Noted. Not urgent yet. Sunday, March the 9th. Dinner at the Clover Street house, which Nathan and Claire had by this point painted a different color, furnished entirely differently, and begun calling our place with the ease of people who have stopped noticing that a phrase contains a claim. There were 6 of us at the table. Nathan and Claire, Claire's parents Gerald and Patricia, their younger daughter Meg, who was visiting from Columbus, and me. The pot roast was good. The cornbread was from a box, which my mother would have considered a minor tragedy, but I've learned to let certain things go. Patricia had brought a bottle of wine she was proud of. Gerald talked at length about a bathroom remodel. Meg was quiet in the pleasant way of someone content to observe. Nathan sat at the end of the table across from me and ate his dinner. It was 5:47 in the evening when Claire set down her fork, looked at her parents, and said, in the tone of someone reporting the completion of an errand, that she had taken care of the property situation. She said she had worked with a real estate attorney. She said everything had been updated properly. She said, and I want to be precise about the wording because it carries weight. Your name isn't on anything anymore. I checked. She looked at Gerald and Patricia when she said it. Not at me. At them. Gerald nodded in the satisfied way of a man whose plan had gone correctly. Patricia said, Good. That settled Anne. Meg looked at her plate. Nathan looked at his plate. I looked at Claire for exactly as long as it took to understand what had just happened in that room, and why it had happened in this particular way, in front of these particular witnesses, at this particular table. Then I took a sip of water. I set the glass down carefully. I nodded once. The nod I have been given to things for 52 years, the one that contains no visible information. All right, I said. Then I went back to my pot roast. That was the whole of my response. I did not challenge the statement. I did not ask for clarification. I did not look at Nathan. I am not a man who argues at dinner tables about things that documents will resolve more efficiently and more permanently than words. What I want you to understand about that moment is this. I was not afraid. I was not even angry in the way people usually mean when they say angry. What I felt, sitting at that table while Claire's parents absorbed the news at my late mother's house, had apparently been absorbed into a different family's understanding of the world, was something much simpler than anger. It was the particular clarity that comes when the ground tells you something and you finally decide to go read the survey. I knew where the deed was. I had filed it myself. I knew what it said. The only question remaining was what Claire thought she had filed, and that was a question the recorder's office on Mill Street could answer in approximately 45 seconds. I drove home through the dark and the light rain on Route 9 that Sunday night, and I was calm in a way that a man who has already decided what he is going to do next is calm. Not peaceful, exactly. Not triumphant. Just organized. The kind of organized that comes from knowing the document is in the third drawer, and the third drawer is exactly where you left it. I got home at 9:06 p.m. I went directly to the home office. The third drawer has always had a stiff pull. I have never fixed it because some things stay the same by design, and some things stay the same by oversight. And with this particular drawer, I have genuinely never sorted out which it is. I pulled it open. The manila folder was there, behind my father's watch and in front of the 2004 certification. I took it out and set it on the desk under the lamp. Then I went to the kitchen and made chamomile tea. For minute steeping, no more, the way I have made it since my wife first made it that way for me in 1997, and I found I preferred it. I brought it back to the desk. I sat down in my father's chair, which I bought for $10 at a church sale in 2007, and have reupholstered twice, and I opened the folder. The deed was there. My name, my mother's property, for 12 Clover Street, Mill Haven, Ohio. Filed with the Mill Haven County Recorder's Office on January 14, 2020. Instrument number 2020-00847. I read it once, carefully, the way I was trained to read survey. Documents, looking for what it says, not what you expected to say. Then I read it again. I set the deed back in the folder, and I sat. I picked up my father's Belova watch, not to check the time, because it hasn't run since 1994, and I know what time it is, but simply to hold it. It is a small weight. It is a specific weight. It is the weight of a man who kept his word in every transaction he ever entered and who believed, as a matter of principle, that a thing you own is a thing you can account for. I have tried to be that man. I have not always succeeded, but I have tried consistently. The rain was still going outside. The kitchen window was dark. Somewhere down the block a dog barked twice. 3 sharp sounds, and then went quiet. The refrigerator hummed. My tea cooled in the mug. I was not thinking about Claire in that moment. Not primarily. I was thinking about my mother's screen porch. I was thinking about her weather report, the one she delivered every morning from the aluminum chair she kept out there from May through October, the same chair for 20-some years, just looking at the sky and declaring it fine or not fine. I was thinking about the rose bushes along the south fence that she had put in during the spring of 1998, and that she tended every season without fail, and that were, based on what Claire had said months ago, apparently scheduled to come out in favor of a privacy hedge. I was thinking that my mother left me that house because she trusted me to take care of what was hers. And the way I take care of things is through documentation and patience and the correct filing of the correct paperwork in the correct place. I set the watch back in the drawer. I drank the last of the tea, which was cool by then. I looked at the clock on the wall. 9:47 p.m. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Ray. Tuesday morning. You free to ride along? He answered in 11 seconds. Yes. That was the whole exchange. That is Ray. 17 words across a full evening, and 11 of them used on logistics. Monday I did not call Nathan. I did not call Claire. I went to a hardware store on Birch Street and bought a set of brushed nickel drawer pulls. 2 of the kitchen cabinet pulls had been loose for 3 months, and I had been meaning to replace them. I came home and installed them, made a sandwich, watched 40 minutes of an old Western I have seen at least 6 times. The one where the man with the quiet voice turns out to be the most dangerous person in the town for the entire film, and nobody understood that until the last 20 minutes. The man on the horse already knows how it ends. He's been waiting for everyone else to catch up. At 2:30 that afternoon, I called Beverly Holt. Beverly is an elder law attorney whose office is on Providence Road, about 12 minutes from my house. I have known her for 9 years, since she helped me set up the original estate documents after my mother's first serious health scare in 2015. She is methodical. She speaks in complete sentences that are organized in advance. She has been doing this work for long enough that nothing surprises her, which is exactly the quality you want in an attorney and a difficult quality to find in a person. Her assistant put me through without asking what it was regarding. Dale, she said. Beverly, I need about 30 minutes Tuesday, if you have availability. I have 9 o'clock. I'll be there at 8:59. She didn't ask me anything further. She knew I would bring the folder. That is also a quality I appreciate. Tuesday, March the 11th. Ray was at my front door at 8:23 in the morning, which is 17 minutes earlier than we had agreed, and exactly consistent with how he has operated his entire life. He had 2 cups of coffee from the gas station on 5th Street, the large size, black for me, black for him, no variation, and he handed mine through the screen door without ceremony. We drove to Beverly's office on Providence Road in Ray's truck, a 2009 Chevy Silverado with 141,000 miles on it. We didn't talk much on the drive. That is not unusual for Ray and me. We have known each other for 52 years, and we have run out of small talk, which is the best possible thing that can happen between 2 men. Beverly's office is on the 2nd floor of a brick building that used to be a savings and loan. The conference table has a chip in the corner that has been there the whole 9 years I have been coming to this office. She was already at the table when we arrived, with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee she had clearly been working on since before we got there. She looked at the folder under my arm and said nothing until I sat down. I told her what had happened at dinner on Sunday. I gave her the deed. I gave her the letter of understanding from 2022. She read both of them in the way she reads everything, which is steadily and without visible reaction. Has anything been filed? I asked. I can find out this morning, she said. I have a direct line to the recorder's digitization desk. If anything was submitted, a petition, a preliminary inquiry, any attorney correspondence, it would be in the system. She looked at the deed once more. What do you want to do regardless of what we find? I want the property in a revocable trust, I said. My name as grantor and trustee, Nathan as successor trustee, so that when I die it passes to him without probate and without any ambiguity about the chain of ownership between now and then. She nodded, as though this was a natural next step, which it was. 2 to 3 weeks for a clean draft. Do you want to authorize me to start the title search this morning while you're here? Yes. Then I'll have something for you by noon. She looked at me for a moment over the top of the legal pad. Dale, whatever she filed or thought she filed, the deed as recorded is controlling. If nothing was submitted to the recorder, there is nothing to unwind. I know, I said. I just want to see it. She nodded again. She understood that. 9 years of working with a man who spent 31 years reading ground truth will teach you that some people need to confirm the boundary themselves, not because they doubt it, but because that is how they are built. We were back in Ray's truck by 9:27 a.m. The Millhaven County Recorder's office is in a low brick building next to the water department, 2 blocks off the main square. There's a waiting area with 4 chairs and orange vinyl and a water cooler that emits a low, thoughtful sound at irregular intervals, like it is working through a problem. There are 3 service windows. Window 3 was staffed by a woman whose name tag read Gloria in black capital letters, who had the particular demeanor of a person who has processed a complete range of human property dispute emotions across a long career and arrived, through sheer accumulated experience, at something resembling serene neutrality. It was 9:03 a.m. on Tuesday, March the 11th. I stepped to window 3. I gave Gloria the property address. For 12 Clover Street, Millhaven. She typed for approximately 15 seconds, the way people who know their systems type, not hunting, just moving. She looked at the screen. She looked at me once, briefly. Then she turned the monitor toward me and said, in the same tone she would use to read a bus schedule, Deed of record. Owner of record, Dale Thomas Brennan. Filed January 14th, 2020, instrument 2020-00847. No subsequent transfers on record. No liens. No encumbrances. No pending petitions. She turned the screen back. Ray was standing slightly behind my left shoulder. He looked at the screen during the moment it was visible. He looked at me. He said, That was the entirety of Ray Brennan's reaction to the confirmation that his brother's late mother's house remained, in the eyes of the Millhaven County recording system, entirely and correctly and undisputedly his brother's. 1 syllable. The man has always known which words the situation requires. I thanked Gloria. She said hum in a way that suggested she had been thanked for this exact service before, under similar circumstances, and found it neither remarkable nor unremarkable. We walked back out through the orange vinyl waiting area and through the glass door into the pale, cold morning of March the 11th. Ray and I stood by his truck for a moment. Neither of us spoke immediately. A city water truck pulled into the lot next door. Somewhere down Mill Street, a delivery driver was arguing with his phone's navigation. She told her parents it was done, Ray said. He was not asking. Yes, I said, in front of 6 people. 5. If you don't count Nathan, who appeared to already know and had made the decision not to tell me. Ray processes for a moment. What's your read on that? I think he was hoping it wouldn't come to a conversation, I said. I think he believed, or wanted to believe, that Claire had the authority to do what she was describing, and that if it was done, it would simply be done and we would all adjust. And Claire. I thought about this carefully, because it deserved careful thinking. Claire believed what she was saying. I said, that's the thing. She wasn't performing. She had talked to someone, some attorney, someone at a title company, I don't know, and she had come away with a conviction that the transfer was either complete or inevitable, and she announced it because announcing in front of her parents was the version that made it real. Ray nodded once. We got in the truck. Beverly called at 11:48 a.m. with the title search result. Nothing. No filing. No attorney of record on Claire's side had submitted so much as a document request to the recorder's office. Whatever conversation Claire had with whatever attorney she consulted, it had not reached a step where anything was filed. The property was exactly as it had always been, mine, unencumbered, correctly recorded. I thanked Beverly and told her to proceed with the trust. I want to say something about Claire, because fairness requires it, and because I think it matters more to this story than the deed does. Claire's parents, Gerald and Patricia, came to this country in their late 20s with a suitcase and $4,000 and built a hardware supply business from a single rented storefront into a company that now employs 11 people and owns its building outright. I respect that. The lesson it teaches is real. Property is language. What you own is what you can stand on when everything else moves. They taught their daughters that faithfully, and it is a correct lesson. What I think happened somewhere in the teaching, though, is that the line between what is yours and what is near you got blurred. When you spend your whole life acquiring and securing and making permanent, the proximity of something can begin to feel like a claim on it. The Clover Street house was near Claire. Claire's family was in it, from a certain angle. In a certain understanding of how property and family intersect, it was logical that it would eventually become hers. That is not malice. That is a particular blindness that comes from being taught only one part of a more complicated truth. My son should have seen the blurring happening. I understand that he didn't, or that he did and chose the path of least resistance, which is also understandable even if it costs him something eventually. Nathan is a good man navigating the space between who he is and who he married, and that is not an easy space to navigate, and I am not without sympathy for him. What I could not accept was the announcement. I checked the performance of accomplished fact in front of witnesses who were meant to confirm it socially before I could respond to it legally. That is not the same thing as making a mistake about property law. That is a choice about how to move against someone, and I want to be precise about the difference because precision matters. I gave Nathan 8 days. On the 9th day, Wednesday, March the 19th, he called at 7:22 in the evening. I let the first call ring, not from anger, but because I was at the stove, and I have a rule about taking important phone calls while standing over something hot. He called again at 8:04. I was done with dinner. I answered, "Dad." His voice was in the register it occupies when he has been having a difficult internal week and has reached the end of his capacity to manage alone. "Nathan, I heard from Beverly Holt's office about the trust." "You did?" A pause. He was composing something. I waited. "Claire wants to talk to you," he said. "I'm sure she does." Another pause. "She talked to someone at a title company back in January. I think she misunderstood what they were telling her about the process, about what would need to happen for her." "Nathan," I kept my voice steady. I always keep my voice steady. "The deed was filed in January of 2020. It has not been transferred. It was not going to be transferred. Beverly is completing a revocable trust that formalizes the ownership structure so that there is no ambiguity about it going forward. Not now, and not when I'm gone. I want you to understand that I'm not doing this to punish anyone. I'm doing it because the documentation should accurately reflect the reality, and it does. And now it will be structured to remain that way regardless of what conversations happen in the meantime." Silence on the line. "The part I'm going to need some time with," I said, "is the Sunday dinner. The announcement, the room. You understand what I mean." A long silence. Then Nathan said quietly, "I know." 2 words. I believe he meant them. I believe those 2 words told me more than a longer answer would have. "I'll be at Sunday dinner next week," I said. "We don't have to make it about this, but I'll be there." "Okay," he said. "Good night, Nathan." I hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. The drawer pulls I had installed Monday looked right, solid, level, in the right place. I made a small adjustment to the one on the far left that didn't quite close flush, tightened the screw a quarter turn, and went to bed. The trust was signed on Thursday, March the 27th, at 9 o'clock in the morning at Beverly Holt's office on Providence Road. I was 1 minute early, as I had told her I would be. The document was 16 pages. Beverly walked me through each section in her methodical way, not because I didn't understand it, but because she respects the process, and so do I. The Clover Street property was placed in the Dale Brennan Revocable Living Trust. I retained full control as grantor and trustee during my lifetime. Nathan was named successor trustee, which meant that when I died, the property would pass to him cleanly, with no probate, no petition, no recorder's office drama for anyone to navigate in a difficult time. Beverly slid the signature page across the conference table with its chipped corner. I signed it with a Parker pen my father gave me when I passed my surveyor certification in 1994. A plain black pen. Nothing special about it except that it has kept working for 30 years without requiring anything from me, which is my criterion for a good tool. I folded my copy, put it in the manila folder, and drove home. It was a clear morning. The last of the winter was still in the air, but not convincingly, the kind of cold that is mostly habit at that point in the season. I made lunch, and I sat at the kitchen table with the folder in front of me and the afternoon light coming through the window at the angle it comes in March, which is lower than you remember from the fall and higher than you remember from January. I want to be honest about what I felt at that table. It was not triumph. It was not the satisfaction you feel when you have won something. It was something quieter and more specific. The feeling I have had at the end of certain surveys, when you set the last stake and step back and see that the line is exactly where the map said it would be. No surprises, no discrepancies, just the ground confirming what the record always said. My mother planted rose bushes along the south fence of the Clover Street house in the spring of 1998. She planted them because she wanted them there, because she owned the ground they were going in, and because nobody had to tell her she was allowed. She tended them every season for 20 years. She never asked anyone's permission for the roses. She just knew the ground was hers, and she put them in. That is what I was thinking about at my kitchen table on a Thursday afternoon in late March, with a signed trust document in the manila folder in front of me and the March light on the window. 6 weeks later, early May, the roses on Clover Street were blooming. I know because I drove past on a Saturday morning on my way to the hardware store, which is 2 blocks further down Clover, and I slowed without stopping and looked at the south fence. Full bloom, red, the same dense red. They've been every May since 1998. Claire had not taken them out. Maybe she had decided against the hedge. Maybe Nathan had asked her not to. Maybe she had simply gotten busy with other things, and the roses had, in the way that roses and documents and properly filed deeds tend to do, simply persisted. I did not stop. I drove on to the hardware store, bought the PVC fittings I needed for the basement utility sink, and drove home. Nathan called that evening. Not about any of it. About summer plans. About whether I was coming to the 4th of July gathering at Gerald and Patricia's. About a fishing trip he wanted to plan for June. I said yes to the 4th of July. Probably, I said June worked for fishing. He said Claire had something she wanted to say to me when I was ready. I said I would let him know when I was ready. He said okay. We talked for 20 minutes about a game and about his car needing new tires and about a restaurant downtown that both of us had heard was good. It was a normal phone call between a father and his son. I want to note that, because it matters, the document was signed. The record was correct. The line was where it had always been. What remained, what is still remaining, is the slower and less documentable work of understanding what the Sunday dinner meant and what it will mean going forward. For Nathan, for Claire, for a particular shape of this family going into the years ahead. I don't know yet what that looks like. I have sat with the question across these months, and I have not arrived at a settled answer. That is either patience or avoidance, and I am genuinely uncertain which it is. And I have decided to be honest about that uncertainty rather than resolve it prematurely into a lesson. That is the thing nobody tells you about patience. From the inside, it doesn't feel like patience. It feels like waiting. Like standing over a survey marker that everyone else has convinced themselves is in a different location, and knowing you are right, and knowing the answer isn't to argue. The answer is to walk back to the original drawing, confirm the coordinates, and let the ground say what is always said. You don't shout about it. You don't hold the stake in the air so people can see you holding it. You said it correctly. You file the record. You trust that the map and the ground, over time, will settle into agreement. The roses were blooming. The trust was signed. The deed of record read exactly as it had read since January 14th of 2020. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. That was enough. For now, it was enough. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Quiet House Stories. I will see you on the next one.